Alright guys, this is the first of a couple of episodes of me teaching you guys how to clean up and get your data into a looping state that's good for gameplay animation. So this is just going to be my process and workflow of what I've learned, learning motion capture for a semester doing this project. My methods may not be perfect. I know some companies use Shogun Post or whatever After Effects proprietary mocap cleanup software is, but this data has been gone through and batch processed through Shogun Post in the mocap studio that I happen to work at, and we're here to basically clean up all the jitters, get it looping and trimmed down and all that stuff. I already have a characterized rig. That can be a completely separate video if I need it to be. But yeah, I'm going to show you guys how to clean up the data, apply it to the rig, and then get it looping and ready for projects. So, first and foremost, I'm going to open up my file. Actually, I'm going to show you around Motion Builder for a second. So, this little menu thing right here, this is your character, basically Motion Builder's like built-in like natural control rig setup. So once you have a characterized character in here, which I will show you what that is in a couple minutes, this is how you can select the different controllers there if you don't want to select it in the viewport. This is your normal viewport. So camera controls are just like Maya, so Alt click moves it, Alt middle mouse click, Alt right click. But yeah, this down here will be your bread and butter. So you have your regular keyframe stuff in this little bar right here. You can keyframe stuff. You can also use the S key to create keys, same as Maya. This is your animation layers thing. You will be using this a lot. It's kind of important. This is your navigator bar. Once you have a characterized thing in here, you will have a character tab that will have important stuff where you can apply modifiers, filters, stuff like that. Your F-curve is the same thing as your graph editor in Maya. So think of this guy like that. Your story, this is what you put your file, like you'll have your characterized file. You're going to drag that into your story, and you're basically going to trim your files down like in Premiere, and then you're going to go from there. That's how you like have multiple like takes in the same file, and then you trim it down to the specific like frame to frame pieces you want, and then you apply it to the rig and so on and so forth. And then I haven't gotten into animation triggers, so the big things that I know to work with is your navigator, your F-curves, your F-curves, your story, and all these guys. Now this is your pose controls. This is useful to get your start and end frames to be the same. I'll show you that in a little bit, but yeah, this is your pose controls page. We use it quite a lot. Your properties page you also use quite a lot. This is kind of like if you want to go into Maya, it is like your channels tab where you have like you select a thing, you have your transform, rotation, scaling, like all that stuff is in your properties tab. Filters is where you start applying stuff to smooth out jitters and things like that. These are like the different things you can do to smooth things and all that. Your asset browser, this one's important. This is basically your file directory. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to add a favorite path for the sake of this demo. So I just right click, add favorite path, and I'm going to go down to basically where all my stuff is. So I have to go in and find my stuff. This way. Okay, so I found my file path in the directory thing. it looks like it's just your desktop, but there is actually ways to get to your PC and your hard drives. And then I found my mocap demo thing. This is just me adding this for the sake of the demo, because I already have my file path directory already set up the way I like it. So I'm going to select the folder I want and click OK. Now this folder and the files within it show up in Motion Builder. Now your file path directory will not update the files that are in the folders unless you restart Motion Builder. And a good preface with this program is Motion Builder is incredibly finicky and not very stable, but unfortunately it is the industry standard. So when you're working with it and a file is like really dying on you, try restarting from the previous save and go from there. Or maybe like with Motion Builder, it is imperative that you backtrack and you save your files and save them often so that you can backtrack. All right. So luckily for me, so this is set up. You'll see why I set this up here in just a moment. I like this guy in. I'm pretty sure, yeah, I prefer this view for that. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with cleaning up the data. So I want to go in and I open Brandon damage 01. I'm going to be doing a damage reaction animation cleanup. I'm going to open that. Don't save, that was just an empty thing. And you click open. Don't worry about all of these. All right. So directly out of the studio, this is what the data looks like. It's actually a fairly clean file. Usually the entire space is covered in red markers sometimes. And you'll notice these are all trackers for the different cameras. We're going to be going in and deleting the cameras. And all this red unmarked, this is all unmarked data, basically. So, first and foremost, how you go back and forth between this view and the schematic view, which is this guy. This guy is very important. So I press Control W to flip between these two. Trust me, this is the fastest way to get back and forth between things. Oh, that's scary. Haven't seen that before. But yeah, when I press Control E, oh, this goes between things. Pretty sure this is the cameras. Control E, I was playing around with Control E there. But I like to go between Control W. So, view, perspective, producer perspective. So, that was the cameras. Apparently, when you Control E, you go between all the different cameras in the space, which is cool, but that's not what we're trying to do. But yeah, Control W, and you'll notice that there is something called System. These are the Vicon Vantage cameras that was capturing the data. We're just going to go in. I just drag selected these guys, and I'm pressing the delete key. Yeah, backspace doesn't work. You have to press delete key. All right. The rest of these are all the unmarked markers. So there is a standard marker, there's a standard system for rigs and for marker placements for motion capture data, and any like markers or things that the camera detects outside of these standardized things, it will be seen as unlabeled markers and stuff like that. Then that way the marker data can easily be applied to a standardized rig. So this is the standardized data here. So all these guys are unwanted data that is just going to mess up with the system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here, drag and do this. You do not want to select this guy. Brandon is important. That is basically our root. Think of him like that. So what we're going to do is we selected all of these unlabeled markers under here. deleted those. I'm gonna click on Brandon and just get him get his little thing looking better. And here is another hotkey that you can use. Make sure you do not have Brandon selected, so I just selected in here to unselect him. Hold space and right click, and you can select anything underneath that hierarchy. That's really useful for unlabeled markers because this can expand. Oh, I've had it expand very, very far before. But anyways, I just pressed the F key, by the way, to do that. But yeah. So you want all these guys gone because this is just reflections from jewelry and stuff like that that just you don't want in your scene. This is just bad data. So delete that. And we're not going to use this sword data for now since we're trying to keep it consistent with the rest of the files. So we're going to delete the sword data. But we use the mocap swords, and you can apply the mocap data to the sword itself, but we haven't been doing that with the rest of the files, so we're going to stay consistent for the sake of this. So the sword data is going to get deleted as well. So now all you have is Brandon's data. You want Brandon's position, him, and all of the data here. You'll recognize this to rig files. For you have the spines and all of this. This looks a little familiar. So like when you select on, let's just click on this guy. Control W. There he is. Yeah, this is just a skeleton. But it's a nice little schematic view. All right, now actually what we're going to do is we're going to take everything from we're going to space, right click, all of this from the hips down. So we have all of these. I'm going to go back to here. We're on frame 1. We're going to set it at 30 FPS. And let's just make sure we're on the first frame. We are. We're going to go to the Properties tab. Rotation, we're going to 0 out. All right, perfect. Now notice he's backwards. He's supposed to be facing this way. So what you do is you click on the hips and now let's see if I get this right in the first try. Yeah, all right. So I'm gonna Control W again, space, right click everything. So we have all these guys. Go back to here. We're gonna keyframe these at frame 1 so that after this, it's always zeroed out for the first frame, and from here on, the data is fine. Yeah. So if you look here, we got our data nice and clean. Beautiful. Okay. Next, we're going to save that. So save this as Brandon damage. This is cleaned. So standard naming conventions, at least the ones that I work with, is C means the data is cleaned. So we're going to save that. All right. So now that you have your character clean, all your characters' mocap data cleaned, there's no dirty marker or data information in the scene. We're going to go here to your template, your character. You could just change this view. You want this guy. You want character. You're going to click on this and drag it over to the hip bone until your hip bone turns green. I'm going to zoom in so you can see that. And you didn't get it unless this pops up. This is what you're looking for. So you click Characterize and Biped. Now you have a bipedal character characterized. So we're going to go here. This guy popped up. This is new. This is one of the most important things on your file. So this guy, we're actually going to rename to Brandon. Make sure that's correct. Yeah. Brandon mocap, because our mocap file was Brandon's. Beautiful. But yeah, make sure that's recorded there, like that's renamed there, and he is characterized. So Control W. It looks good. He's got his skeleton, and beautiful. So what we're going to do now is we're going to save this, because things get finicky. So now you have a cleaned and characterized file. So I make sure the characterized file is always called CC because it's cleaned and characterized. Next, we got to plot it to our rig. So what we're going to do right now actually is we're going to open up the rig file. Some people have said it doesn't really matter which one they open up first and then merge the other one into, but I found that I get buggy in Motion Builder if I don't open the rig and then bring the characterized file in. So this guy is a already characterized rig file, and see I've got his character, he's a thresher. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna merge the characterized branded damage file. I'm gonna open that, merge the data. All right. He's being a little spicy right now, but that's okay. So we're gonna go here, and the thresher is gonna be a character, and he's gonna be active. So you'll notice, make sure the Brandon mocap file is not active. So now the mocap data is doing what it's supposed to. Now, because it's a different body proportion to the actor, you are going to have to go in and clean up data right there, like how right there, you see the arm going through the hip. That's just stuff that you have to do because he has a different body proportions than Brandon. And these particular enemies have unique legs, so they kind of have some unique mocap cleanup stuff that you have to learn that regular characters you don't always have to deal with. But that's stuff that you still need to know regardless, so it's good things to learn. So I'm glad I got this character as one of the things that we got to work on. But yeah. So just going to push that back to the beginning. This guy's working fine. So the thresher, we're going to plot this to the skeleton. So we're going to bake the animation data from the mocap file to the skeleton on the thresher. So we're going to do this, 30 FPS, plot character. And now we're going to go in and delete this file, yes to all. So now with the thresher, the character has officially plotted data. Beautiful. All right, now we're going to file save this. Go here. We're going to rename this to plotted. Beautiful. Now we have our mocap data plotted to the character. This is a big step that every single file has to take, and like if you want your data onto a certain character, you can plot things back and forth between characters. It's really easy to go between skeletons and stuff like that. But yeah, that is a step that sometimes we will already have somebody like going in and like plotting things to the skeleton just to get this step over with, because it's not hard. It's just tedious to do it for every mocap file, but sometimes some of the files are already done and some of them aren't. So that was important to show you guys. Alright guys, I'm gonna show you a little fix for something, by the way, because I don't know if you noticed, but in the characterizing and plotting part of my demo, you'll notice these guys sticking out in the plotted portion. There's a reason for that. It is because of a unique flaw problem on my part with how we made the rig file and what the character is named. So, when you go into the schematic view, Control W, you'll notice this. You notice Brandon has his normal stuff here, but he also has an entire second skeleton. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out which one that is. So we're going to choose a joint that's a little bit more, let's go with right shoulder, right hand. Control W. Okay, so that's the skeleton that's actually inside of him. So we go to this skeleton instead. Okay, make sure we're not selected on anything. Space, right click, and delete these files, because those are the grunt files that basically what happened was the Brandon mocap data and the Thresher rig file both have in this schematic view their top node named as Brandon, because me, as a dum-dum, I decided to name both the Thresher and these files Brandon, which led to a unique issue with plotting the character to the skeleton. You have that unique problem of the data basically all thinks, oh, it's under the node Brandon, so it should go under the node Brandon. There can only be one of that main branching node, a main top node. So that's just a unique bug that happens with the system because of improper naming conventions. Wanted to show you the quick fix real quick. Alright guys, so what we're going to be doing today is taking a plotted character file and applying it back to the rig, and then once we take that, we're going to be doing the rest of the cleaning process and trimming things down and stuff. So, first I'm going to go into my characterized file, or my Thresher. I'm going to pick a animation file at random that has not been worked with. Let's go with, let's see what's not been messed with yet of these guys. Sure, let's take light/301. So this file has already been plotted. So you know how you have your navigator open and you look, oh wow, there's my Thresher character. It usually looks a little bit more like this, but I move it like this so I can see these guys better. Now you're going to go to, it's on the bar with navigator, you're going to go over to story. Think of this as kind of like a Premiere timeline. So what you're going to do is you're going to take this plotted file and drag it into the story. And you notice, and then what we're going to do is we're going to click on the plotted file. You may recognize the name from here. Going to right click on this file and frame start end. So what that did was that made the timeline be frames starting and ending on this plotted file. So I'm going to Alt right click drag just to like zoom out a little bit. There you go. And you can kind of see, all right, so start from the beginning, turn looping on. Going to make sure the file is in 30 FPS because that's the consistent one we've been working with. And you'll notice that rig file now has this attached to it. That's crazy. Awesome. Okay. So now we're going to be kind of just watching through the timeline and looking for some stuff that, like a file that may work for what we want to do. So I'm going to let things kind of go towards the end of the file because he usually has his stuff kind of figured out by the end. Yeah, so let's take a look at this. Sure, I kind of like that. I'm gonna keep going. Oh, thank you, Brandon. Thank you. Okay, something that I'm kind of looking for is, are they going in a straight line? Because you notice in that one, he kind of went a little diagonal. He's kind of going diagonal a lot more. So let's go back a little bit. There we go. That's a little better. So what we're going to do is kind of go back to the beginning of it. We're going to start zooming in on this file since we need to go a little bit more in depth. So now we kind of go frame by frame. So go back. Kind of like right there. So making sure that this is selected. You see this little razor blade tool? Bam, you cut the top, you cut the front part. And I'm just gonna make note that this is on frame 3008. Just gonna write that down real quick. 3008. Because what's good is to make note of which frames you start and end on when you're trimming these files down, so that later on you can much more easily find the file, like the exact frames again when you're working. Okay, so what I just did there, I'm just gonna, okay, so we're gonna play this backwards. All right, I think we might be able to. I think I might be able to trim it down and get this so that it doesn't have that like, so it goes to here and stops there. So I'm gonna do that. This is frame 3104, 3104. All right, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do a save here. So I'm gonna go into my, this is my file structure, so don't worry about that. Actually, you guys can see what I'm doing. So what I'm doing is I'm taking, this is in my little folder structure, you can kind of see where my brain is. This is LS3. So since it was on the, here, I'll show you again. File, save as. You notice that's still on the grunt rig file because you dragged your animation, your plotted animation into the rig file and not the other way around. So what you got to do is you got to go back and have it named correctly again. So this guy was LS3, and I changed this from plotted file. So this is my trim file, basically the file that I'm working on, like trimming everything down on. So I save that, save. Once we're ready, I go in and I delete this, and I delete this, and I move this tiny little guy. Look at him go. He's just a little guy. Actually, I should have left that there. Scooch you all the way down to the beginning. And it'll click into 0. So now what I'm going to do is right click and click. You see how it's still on the thousands for this? What we're going to do is right click on this, click frame start and end, and it will immediately like go back to, it'll make it this length naturally. So that's great. So what we're going to do is we're going to file save this again. Actually, I don't do this yet. Cancel. I'm going to not do that quite just yet. So you've got your animation trimmed down in the story to the way we want it. It's at 30 FPS, so it's at the right frame. What we're going to do is we're going to plot the character to the control rig and do an FKIK. And it's 30 FPS. You shouldn't have to mess with these. And plot. Now, it is very important because you will not be able to edit anything and save that edit data properly unless you delete this. You no longer need the story, so the story should be completely empty. And I deleted it here, so it deleted the character. So if I delete here, I'll show you. It still keeps the character. So you have to delete the character as well. Now, this data is perfectly baked onto here, and you're doing good. So, now we're going to get things a little bit more looping. We're going to go to properties and actually pose control and have that open. Start a new frame. We're going to center on frame, please. Thank you. That makes my camera work a little better for me. I just pressed F to center it on him. So now we're going to go into here and we're going to grab his hip controller for, this is the control rig specifically in Motion Builder. So the control rig is useful because it creates kind of an IK control situation already. I didn't fuck anything up there, did I? Nope, we're good. So you take this, you click there, specifically on the hip controller, and we're going to make a keyframe here on the first frame. And we're also going to see these, I'm on the pose controls right here. We're going to click the plus button, and this creates a new pose here. And you'll see what I'm doing here in a second. So we're on frame 1. Now we're going to go to this frame, and I'm going to double click this pose, and it snaps into a new pose, and I'm going to keyframe that. So now, if you notice, I don't know if you will, but it is the same pose. All right, so that is lovely. We love this. Okay, next, what I'm going to do, generally, if you're working on a project, ask basically the programmers and designers what they want to do with the file. So right here, actually I'm going to save this file right now. Save as. I'm going to have this as looping since it is at that point. Because I'm about to do something that is, it kind of takes away the data for it moving forward and back here. I'm going to do in place and do, I think it's Z. Yes. So, when you watch, which it basically keeps a file in place. When you're working with game animation, it can be important to understand the context of what you're doing with the animations. So in this particular case, in this particular animations case, when you're working with AI animation, it's on the animators to talk with the programmers and figure out what is the functionality of the animation file, like what are you going to be using this for? Because like let's say you're doing a cutscene, it's fine for him to walk forward the way you want him to because, you know, you don't know what he's like, you can just have him walk forward in the space. But if you have a file that's walking forward in the space for a gameplay state machine, that character is going to be like when you get to the end, like when he gets to here and the animation stops playing, he's going to do exactly what the control rig does, and he snaps back into place. And that can be bad for like gameplay and stuff. So sometimes when you're working with programmers, they'll ask you to have the animation file be in place, and they'll programmatically have him move forward so that they have a little bit more control over that stuff. So it's on animators to make sure they talk to their programmers and see what is intended with the files. With locking you can lock all of them. You can see how bad it looks when you're pretty much putting a pin right here and having the center hip not move at all. But the more you unlock, okay, now he can go back and forth to the sides. Now he can go up and down. The X and Y, so like you can have him make sure he goes straight with the X, but he will slide a little bit. It's better to mainly focus on using Z. And that one's mainly to keep him going in place. I'm gonna put on his hand, since his hand doesn't, this particular hand doesn't do much data jitter anyways. I'm actually gonna set, so what I did, okay, let me back up a little bit. I was on pose control. I'm going over to filters. Whenever you have jitter in an animation where he's basically jittering out, or like hands are shaking, files are popping and snapping, you're going to go to filters. You're going to select, you can do this with both the joints or the controllers, like the control rig. I'm going to be doing this with a control rig because it kind of just evenly does it over all of the general area of the hand region. So the filters are basically the smoothing filters for the file. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to the F curves. You're going to click on rotation. So I'm going to go to my base animations. There we go. This looks more accurate. So got this control, this right here. This is what I'm looking for. See these? This is all the animation data. Luckily, this file seems pretty smooth. Like I happen to pick a really smooth one. A lot of the times the hand animation data is pretty messy because the hand markers get covered up pretty easily, especially because he's holding a sword most of the time and the markers are on like the end of the fingertips, and so they kind of get hidden in the hands. So we're actually doing pretty good here. I don't know about these guys. So there's a few ways you can do this. So with the filters. So I just showed you start frame, stop frame. So you can click any frame, set start, set stop. You can also just drag and select. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and select everything. Just do a little bit of Buttersworth. Preview that. You can kind of see how the data, here, let me cancel it. Let's look for a little bit less even of a part. So like you see that? There. Boom. Actually, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Accept that. That was the big one. Let's say right here, Butterworth. Preview. This one didn't do much. I'm going to accept that. But yeah. Overall, this file is pretty good. Generally, you don't have to do much work with this stuff. It's usually just the hands a little bit. So, we got him here. He's looping. A lovely little thing that happens with these files, and you can't really do anything about it until it's plotted to the skeleton again, is you see this little guy? Like, ignore the control rig. He's slightly rotated. This is an easy little fix. You just gotta wait till you're kind of done doing all your edits to the control rig before you go back to doing this. So, we've got him looping. I'm actually gonna leave the fingers alone because they're fairly simple to fix. And I am a little wary of working on them. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go here, S, and then S, and we're gonna go to here. I'm just pressing S to set up keys here. So I got a key there, kind of fixing them. And now I'm going to go back to about here with a key to fix him. There we go. Key that. And if he wants to flip me off a little bit in the file, that's going to be okay. Okay by me. So the reason why I did a keyframe here and here before doing the actual keyframes is you want to make sure that the data still like transitions okay from the first frame and the last frame. So if we look at our F curve real quick, like we want to make sure that our start and ends are in a good place, and then we put these kind of as a buffer of making sure they're not being messed with, and then we do our data. Kind of how I do it. Kind of the approach I'm taking. So, alright, so we got him doing this. This is beautiful, beautiful. Alright. Next, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do this next part where we're plotting the character to the skeleton. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that here. Alright. So, reason why I did this. Alright, so we basically, you're editing, think of it like this. You're editing things in the control rig, and then you're applying that edits to the base animation when you're plotting it to the skeleton. You're always going back and forth and doing that. So we've got that done. So like, yeah. Next, we're gonna go plot the character back to the control rig because, and we're gonna save this file. Nooping 01. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to be editing the arm data a little bit so that it doesn't quite so get all up in his face and in his legs. Like, see here, his legs? Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to take his little wrist controller. We're going to add an animation layer here. So I'm going to do a keyframe here, keyframe here. Go here, and so there and there. So we got to get this path here. So let's get this keyframed. So how does this look? So this, all right, let's see how that looks. Yeah, so I know it's kind of awkward figuring out motion paths when you're kind of like undoing the animation trail of like their natural movement, but you kind of just got to figure out a way to get them to move without losing so we got like losing the data. So around here we need him to be a little more out. There we go. So let's take a look at that. Okay, that's gonna look okay. Now to handle this other wrist. So this one's gonna be the tricky guy because he actually, just to be sure, we're gonna plot this to the skeleton because When you plot things to the skeleton, that saves the data. You notice all these keyframes went away, but the data still is acting the same. It's because it's now in the base layer. So we're going to plot this back to the control rig. Okay, so now we've got a clean slate to work with. So we're going to grab this guy, keyframe at the beginning, keyframe at the end. I know what's happening here. We're going to be fixing this once we're done doing our edits. So now so we got this going on. I'm going to keyframe here. So that's not ideal. What we're going to do, I don't want to get rid of some of this. This guy's a tricky one. So what we're going to do is we're going to do kind of that, see where we can kind of go from. Maybe edit his head a little bit. Okay, I'm going to double check the arm. Doesn't cut through the other arm anymore. It does cut a little. I'm gonna keyframe that to be there. Keyframe that to be. And then make sure you're not hitting anything. Okay. All right. Now we're going to be going into the, let's look at this little neck right here. I think if I, yeah. We're going to plot this character to the skeleton, plot him back. Whoopsie. All right, now we're going to go here. I'm kind of just like finding joints to play with and seeing where I can go with this. So I grab his head. Let's grab his head. Just lift his head up a little bit. Save that. So make sure his face is looking the same way. Okay, so let's check his head there. He still kind of clips through this, but I don't know if this one is going to be on the arms or not. Let's see, let's get this data plotted to the skeleton real quick. Now let's plot this back to the control rig. Yep. Okay. Let's get this shoulder going a little bit. Plot here, or keyframe there, keyframe at the end. Alright. So. Keyframe here. Alright, there. So I got both ends of it. No. We're gonna grab you. That's a little better. Alright, let's see how that animation looks. I think that's pretty good for now. So, we're gonna bake this data to the skeleton again. So next, we've got a new little problem to deal with. See the little toesy sticking through? He kind of sticks through the floor a little bit. That's because the floor contact is not properly set for this file. So we're going to do something that's going to feel a little backwards. We are going to uncharacterize the character. Look at him go. He's now just the skeleton again. From here on out, you should be at frame 1 and you are not messing with the timeline at all for a little bit. So we're going to go to Asset Browser. Kind of helps if you go back into this view. And that is why I like the other view for this file system when I'm scrolling through this thing. It's a lot easier to read. But for the sake of the elements folder, which I need for floor contact, this is now the floor contact section of the project. I'm going to be adding a plane to this area. So I'm going to go to Properties. I'm going to zero out the transformations. And just because I like to have a big area for floor contact, I put this to 10 and 10. You can do 10 to all of them, but I know that it's just a plane, so it only affects these two. This just comes from repetitive use. All right, so make sure you got your character and your thresher selected, so you got this menu. Click on this, on the plane, hold X, and drag the plane into left foot and then right foot. So what this is left foot floor and right foot floor. So you're telling the motion builder, what do you want me to consider the floor for each foot? And now we're going to go and characterize the person again. We're not going to touch them. We're not going to touch the timeline still because we need to get these guys fixed. You see these little dots? You may have noticed them earlier when you're working on files. These are what you consider the contact systems. So, or like this is how it detects what is your hands and feet. Now, you don't really have to do hands. I'm not going to do the hands because we don't actually have hand contact on the floor. If you're doing like an acrobatic sequence, it'd be more important. But for right now, we're doing floor contact for feet. So I go and I select this front joint. If you notice, it does it for both feet. So that's nice. You only have to do it to one foot and then both feet are set. And you're basically setting the perimeter of what is the furthest corners of the feet. So I've got that corner, got this one, and you notice this affects both front and you'll notice that it does this as well. So pretty handy little controller system. I don't know why, but with the thresher feet specifically, it only lets me go up to there for the back of the feet. So don't worry about that. The big thing is making sure these two toes are correct. So we've got that. Now let's go back to the character settings and plot character to the control rig. All right, we got them plotted. Next, this is where the magic happens. We go down into the modifiers and you notice there's a floor contact one. Beautiful. Wow, there's floor contact behavior. We need feet floor contact and toes floor contact to be active. So let's activate the feet one. You notice that just did something. And then the toes one. All right, so this tells us, wow, look at it. It's already doing so great. And now once you move this up and down, the feet won't go past this point. So now you can use your timeline and figure out what looks the best. And this is just playing with the floor contact and seeing what works best. So I'm going to go as far down as I can go and see what this looks like. I like to go underneath to see where things are. You can't really get it perfect, but you can get it as close as you can. Yeah, you kind of have to. You have to pull the feet up as far as possible for. Let's go all the way back to the beginning and get these guys to about there's good. Now let's take a look at how that looks. I'd say that's about as good as you're going to get. So we're going to plot the character back to the skeleton, and you should not need this floor anymore. You can delete the floor. So all right, next up is getting that beginning and ending snapping done. So that was your floor contact. This next thing we're going to do is we're going to grab his hip skeleton. You notice this looks different than his controllers. That's because we're in the skeleton mode. So we're on our trusty little animation layer 1. We're going to keyframe here, and we're going to watch right here. We're going to be staring here. So you notice not all, but some of the values we have to copy here and paste here. Keyframe that. This is just a tedious little part. So on keyframe 1, we copy, paste, keyframe, copy, so now start and end are exactly the same. Let's take a look at this file now. Beautiful. All right, so we're gonna call this file pretty much done. This is what I'm happy with. So I'm gonna save this guy as we did. I'm gonna save this as 3, and we did floor contact. I'm actually gonna go ahead and go to here. Final. Save here. And now I'm also going to file and save him in my finals folder and save this as GRU SLS3. All right, so another thing that I forgot to mention before is you got to go in and fix this after you do your floor contact. So just kind of like how you have in your animation layer, you did your frame start and end fix. You also got to go in and just do a little bit of something very simple. Go in to your hip bone. Just make sure that once you're done with your animation, you put them back on the ground. Once with the floor contacts. Because it moves the floor up to where you need it to be, but it doesn't actually, there you go. Ah, I see the problem. And then you go here. And just give that a little keyframe. And now your contact poses, your actual start and end poses actually kind of start and end on the ground. We took a plotted file that had like about 5 to 10 minutes of data, and we now turned it into a looping animation. But yeah. Anyways, thank you guys so much for following along with this. This is pretty much the mocap cleanup process. Yeah, I've pretty much covered everything. Thank you guys so much for watching. See ya.